A little boy sends a thank you card to a billionaire CEO. For the child support you don't know you're paying. Amused, the CEO asks his accountant to look into it, only to be stunned by what they uncover and what it means. Before we get started, tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. We always love hearing from you. And if you enjoy these stories, a quick like really helps support the channel. Now, get comfortable and enjoy the story. Ashley didn't like saying no to extra shifts. Even when she came home so tired, she could barely pull her shoes off. Nights at the hospital blurred into mornings at home. Most weeks she juggled 12-hour days, picking up as many hours as she could manage before her legs gave out. Or Lucas needed her to show up for something. Open house, a scraped knee, a question about fractions. It was never easy, but she'd gotten good at making do. They lived in a small third-floor apartment in a worn but clean building, where the heater rattled in the winter and the pipes moaned after every shower. She made it work. Rent was always paid. The fridge was never empty. Lucas had everything he needed, even if it came from discount bins or second-hand shops. He never complained. Lucas was the kind of kid teachers loved and secretly dreaded. He asked too many questions, read too much for someone his age, and never stopped talking. Ashley joked that his brain ran on batteries she couldn't afford. What most people didn't see was how observant he was. He didn't miss much. When she tried to quietly open envelopes from the Grant Family Foundation and tuck them into her drawer, Lucas had already noticed. When she told him not to worry about money, that things were fine, he'd nod but still linger around the door during late-night budget talks with herself. She never explained where the money came from, only that it helped them, and that was all that mattered. One rainy Thursday, Lucas's teacher assigned a writing project. A thank you card to someone who helped you. Most of the kids picked firemen or grandparents or favourite lunch ladies. Lucas didn't hesitate. He pulled a crumpled foundation statement from the recycling pile, memorized the name, and wrote in careful crayon. Dear Mr. Grant, thank you for the child support. You don't know you're paying. I like my apartment and my school, and when my mom isn't tired, we play card games. That money helps. Love, Lucas. He added a crooked smiley face, folded it twice, and stuffed it in an envelope from his mom's desk. He addressed it to Nathaniel Grant, Big Fancy Office, New York City, and handed it to the mailman himself, proud as anything. Ashley never found out. She was working a double that weekend, and barely had time to comb through his backpack, let alone notice one missing envelope. Across the state, inside the glossy headquarters of Grant Technologies, Nathaniel was 3 espresso shots into a board meeting when his assistant dropped a stack of mail onto his desk. Most of it was filtered trash, investment requests, letters from fans who still thought he was cool, the occasional art student hoping he'd fund their dreams. But in the middle of the pile sat a white envelope with colourful crayon writing and no return address. He opened it out of boredom more than anything. Read it once, then again. The phrase, child support you don't know you're paying, stuck out like a neon sign in a fog bank. He glanced around, unsure if someone was watching, waiting for his reaction. It felt like a joke, or a very strange kind of fan mail. He leaned back, rereading the messy but direct scrawl. The name, Lucas. The mom, no last name, no specific claim. But the tone didn't read like a prank. It read like a kid being honest. He dropped the letter on his desk and left it there, unfinished coffee forgotten. Nathaniel wasn't used to surprises. His world ran on code, order, and non-disclosure agreements. But this thing, it wouldn't leave him alone. The rest of the day was a blur of meetings and emails, but the letter followed him. He thought about it on the drive home, where the city lights blurred through tinted windows. He thought about it while pouring a drink he didn't want and flipping channels he wouldn't watch. He didn't have children. He had never wanted them, not officially. His life had always been about control, timing, expansion. There had been women, of course, but not since college had he gotten seriously involved. The possibility, however remote, that a piece of his past had circled back through a kid's scribbled thank you card, it made him uneasy. He took a photo of the letter and sent it to his attorney, Joanna, with a brief message. "Please look into this. Quietly." He added a note. "Trust Fund, Grant Family Foundation. Find out if this is real." Then he stared at the screen, glass still full beside him, and sat in silence, longer than he meant to. Nathaniel hadn't visited the Grant Family Foundation's operations in years. After his father's death, he'd kept it alive out of obligation. The foundation handled charitable donations, educational programs, community grants, things that looked good in press releases. He approved budgets and trusted the board. If any part of his money was flowing to a single mother and child, it hadn't crossed his desk. The next morning, Joanna replied that she'd start digging. No paper trail could stay hidden forever, especially not under a foundation with his name on it. She promised discretion, though she couldn't hide the curiosity in her voice when they spoke. Nathaniel brushed it off and kept the details vague. It might be nothing, probably was. But the image of the card stayed with him, Lucas's careful writing, the tone of it. No malice, just thanks. He slid the card back into the envelope, left it on the corner of his desk, and tried to return to his usual rhythm. But something had shifted. He wasn't sure what or why it mattered so much. All he knew was that he needed answers, and for the first time in years, they wouldn't come from a spreadsheet or a stock report. The envelope with the crayon-lettered thank you card stayed on the corner of Nathaniel's desk for nearly a week, untouched but not forgotten. He couldn't bring himself to throw it away, and every time he caught sight of it, the same feeling crept in, restless, uneasy, like something important was just out of reach. Joanna's voice, calm and clipped as always, echoed in his mind. "I'll look into it," quietly. She had never needed prompting to be thorough. When she finally called, he stepped out of a product review meeting without an apology and took the call in the hallway, one hand pressed to his temple. Joanna got to the point, without small talk. "There's a trust," she said. "Set up 8 years ago by your father. Buried in the Foundation's community development grants, but it's not a typical disbursement. It's privately managed, off the books from your main operations. The only beneficiary is a woman named Ashley Dawson. Monthly payments, set to continue until the child turns 18. Nathaniel leaned against the wall. The noise of the office, muffled behind glass, suddenly felt far away. And no legal documentation of paternity, no court order. But there's a memo in your father's estate files, handwritten, says, "Sensitive family matter, Ashley D. discretion necessary. Honor, commitment." He didn't respond right away. Joanna waited. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "I think I knew her. Should I keep digging?" He hesitated, then said, "Send me everything, and find a photo." Later that night, he sat in his apartment, staring at a printed image Joanna had sent. A recent photo, probably pulled from a local news site or a public profile. Ashley was standing in front of a hospital, wearing scrubs, hair pulled back, looking tired but steady. He knew that face. It wasn't just a vague memory, it was real. They'd met during his final year at Stanford, before his company took off, before everything in his life became meetings and cameras and non-stop acceleration. She'd been studying nursing, working part-time at the library, where he sometimes holed up with old textbooks and broken headphones. They'd gone out a few times, shared some blurred weeks that felt calm in a way nothing had since. Then they drifted. Or maybe he'd disappeared. He couldn't even remember how it ended. He stared at the photo until the silence started to press in, then picked up the letter again, the one with Lucas's looping crayon lines, a thank you for something he hadn't known he was giving. And now there was a name to go with it. Ashley. A kid named Lucas, 8 years ago, lined up too well. The math worked. It all worked. Too neatly. Joanna's voice had been careful, measured, but she'd slipped in one warning. Don't make any moves yet. No contact. Not until you're sure what you want. If the press gets wind of this... He'd cut her off. I'm not waiting around for headlines. She'd sighed. Then at least be discreet. The next day, Nathaniel's team announced he'd be appearing at a local tech summit in a small city about 4 hours north of the city. On paper, it looked like standard PR, keynote, Q&A, maybe a donation to local STEM programs. No one questioned it. He told Joanna to coordinate with the foundation to sponsor a youth mentorship event while he was in town. She arranged it without asking questions. He didn't mention Ashley or Lucas or anything about why this city and this school district mattered. Meanwhile, in a small apartment on the east side of town, Ashley opened an envelope addressed to the Dawson family from the Grant Family Foundation. She unfolded the crisp letter with skeptical fingers. Lucas had been invited to attend a STEM mentorship day at a nearby university, fully funded, transportation included, lunch provided. Ashley scanned it twice. She wasn't one to fall for random invitations, especially those with corporate logos and slick formatting. But the timing was strange. She hadn't applied for anything, hadn't even spoken to anyone at the foundation in years. It looked legit. It referenced Lucas by name and school. Her instinct told her to throw it away. Lucas saw it first. A STEM thing? Wait, like with computers and robots? Ashley eyed him. Don't get ahead of yourself. It's probably just one of those publicity stunts. But it says I got picked. Why would they pick me if they didn't want me to go? She wasn't sure how to answer that. The last time she'd heard anything from the Grant Foundation, it had been a dry letter confirming that the trust would continue as usual. There had never been invites or events, just quiet deposits and formal acknowledgements. She hadn't told Lucas where the money came from, not directly, only that someone had wanted to help. She never thought he'd go poking around for answers. Still, Lucas's excitement was genuine. He kept reading the letter out loud, tripping over words like innovation and partnership. His smile was wide and insistent. He hadn't smiled like that in weeks. And Ashley couldn't bring herself to take it away from him. She sighed, tucked the letter back into the envelope, and said, "Fine, I'll sign the permission slip, but I'm coming too. I don't care what they say." Lucas whooped, ran to find his sneakers, and began packing as if the event were tomorrow. Back in Manhattan, Nathaniel stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, watching the city bleed into evening. He held a copy of the same invite in his hand. His name was printed across the top of the program. Opening remarks, Nathaniel Grant, CEO, Grant Technologies. It was the perfect cover. But this wasn't about speeches or scholarships. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, only that something about the card, the photo, and that lingering name in his father's files had unlocked a door he hadn't known existed. Now that it was open, he couldn't ignore it. He had a name, a city, a child who might be his, and a woman from his past who might never have expected him to show up again. He packed light, not because he didn't expect to stay long, but because he didn't know yet if he'd be welcome. The auditorium buzzed with the layered noise of folding chairs, the soft rustle of printed programs, and the low hum of conversation bouncing off the high ceilings. Nathaniel stood just off stage, hands in his pockets, watching as groups of kids filed in alongside parents and teachers. No cameras, no press. Just a carefully curated list of invitees and a room full of eager faces. His eyes scanned the rows more than once, looking for someone he'd never met but already felt tied to. Then he saw them. Ashley was seated 3 rows from the front, angled slightly toward the stage, her posture alert. Lucas sat beside her, shifting in his chair, a small tablet resting on his lap. He was talking to the kid next to him, gesturing with both hands as he explained something that clearly thrilled him. Nathaniel didn't need more than a few seconds to spot it: the shape of the nose. The way the kid's mouth curved when he smiled. It was like watching a memory move. He forced himself to focus during his short welcome speech, kept it light and fast, something about innovation and future leaders, the kind of language he could deliver in his sleep. The applause was polite. Cameras flashed only for the official photographer. Nathaniel stepped away quickly after, bypassing the press table and slipping into the back of the room. He watched Lucas answer questions during the hands-on workshop, raising his hand too often, offering to explain parts of the circuit-building activity before the instructors finished talking. He had that edge, the one Nathaniel remembered from his own childhood. Too many thoughts, not enough time to keep them in. Ashley stayed close, but let Lucas lead. She wasn't talking to anyone unless she had to. Once, her eyes skimmed the room and landed on him. There was no flicker of recognition, just a pause. Then she looked away. After the event wrapped and the kids were ushered to the last exhibit, Nathaniel stepped outside and waited near the entrance. He didn't pace, didn't check his phone. He waited like someone who couldn't do anything else until this was done. When she walked out 10 minutes later, alone, her bag over one shoulder, he stepped forward. "Ashley." She stopped. Her expression didn't shift, but there was recognition now. Her voice came quiet, even. "I thought it might be you. I didn't mean for this to be dramatic. You invited my son to an event with your name on the banner. You don't get to act casual." He nodded once, accepting the hit. "I didn't know how else to see you, or him." She crossed her arms, but didn't walk away. "You could have just left it alone. I got a letter." That caught her. "From Lucas?" "Yeah. Thank you for the child support you don't know you're paying. Ring a bell?" Her mouth tightened. He did that on his own. I didn't even know until days later. "I believe you." A pause passed between them. Cars pulled away from the curb behind her. Somewhere nearby, a student laughed too loud. Then she asked, "Why now?" Nathaniel glanced down, then back up at her. "Because I didn't know until I saw his face." Ashley let out a long breath. Not annoyed, more like someone bracing for something they hoped would hurt less this time. "I tried. Years ago. I sent a letter after I found out I was pregnant. Got nothing back. No contact, no email, no phone call. Then I sent another. Same thing. Then your father's office reached out." Nathaniel blinked. "My father? He said you were too busy, too high profile, that there was too much risk and not enough certainty. He offered the trust fund, asked for silence, said it would protect everyone. The pieces fell like dominoes. The memo Joanna found, the quiet monthly payments, the way his father had managed everything behind closed doors, even after death. I didn't know. I never got those letters." She nodded once, as if that part didn't surprise her. "By the time Lucas was born, I didn't have it in me to keep chasing. I figured if your father wanted to help, fine. But I never told Lucas who you were. I wanted him to grow up without wondering why someone didn't want him. Nathaniel felt that hit land harder than anything else. Not because it was cruel, because it was fair. I'm not here to make excuses, he said, but I should have known. I should have asked more questions about the foundation, about the money going out under my name. Ashley adjusted the strap on her shoulder. Well, now you know. There was a long stretch of silence before he asked, Does he know anything about me? About who I am? She shook her head. He knows the money helps, that it comes from the Grant Foundation. That's it. That card he sent? That was him being his usual weird, thoughtful self. He found one of the statements in the recycling bin, put the pieces together himself. I didn't put him up to it. Nathaniel nodded slowly. He didn't doubt her. He remembered being that kind of kid, curious in a way that made adults nervous. I don't know what you want, she said. I don't know either, he admitted. I just couldn't leave it alone. She studied him for a moment. This isn't some project. He's not a name you can fix with a check or a weekend visit. He's a kid, a good one, and if you're not sure you're staying, it's better to walk away now. I'm not here to blow up your life. You already did. That stung more than he expected. He looked down the sidewalk toward the exit, then back at her. Can I see him again? Not now. Later. Whenever you think it's right. Ashley didn't answer right away. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. After a while, she said, I'll think about it. Then she walked past him, without another word. Nathaniel didn't follow. He stayed outside long after her car pulled away, hands still in his pockets, head full of the kind of questions he wasn't used to not answering. Everything felt tilted, like someone had pulled back the curtain on a room he hadn't known he was living in. Lucas existed, Ashley had tried, and his father had made sure he never found out. What came next wasn't obvious. He couldn't undo the past. He couldn't step in and pretend he belonged. But he could show up. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to start. Nathaniel returned to New York with a mind full of noise and very little sleep. The city's rhythm, the endless traffic, the screens glowing with headlines, the meetings lined up like dominoes, felt strange after the quiet clarity of standing face to face with Ashley. After seeing Lucas, nothing about the boy was uncertain anymore. It wasn't just a hunch now, or a memory stirred up by a name. Lucas was his son. There was no test, no signed document, but Nathaniel didn't need either. He'd seen enough in a day to understand what had been kept from him for almost a decade. Joanna met him in his office the morning after he returned. She closed the door behind her and waited as he stared out the window, coffee untouched. So? She asked carefully. It's him, he said. Joanna was quiet a moment. Does she know you're certain? She didn't deny it. And? She told me she tried. Sent letters. My father intercepted them, set up the trust to shut it down. Joanna sat across from him, tapping her pen against a closed folder. Do you want to go public with this? No. He turned back toward the room. Not yet. Not unless I have to. She didn't press. Nathaniel rarely asked for time with anything. The hesitation told her everything she needed to know. Over the next few days, he met with a tight circle, just her, his head of communications, and the director of the Grant Foundation. They discussed logistics, hypotheticals, what to do if the story ever surfaced. They assumed, wrongly, that they had time to prepare. The leak didn't come from Nathaniel or Joanna. It came from someone on the Foundation's legal staff, someone curious enough to ask a question over drinks with a friend who worked in media. By the next morning, A story appeared on a gossip site known for its aggressive scoops and blurry ethics. The headline stretched across Nathaniel's phone as he stepped into the elevator. Tech Titan has secret love child with small town nurse. He didn't even finish reading it before calling Joanna. "It's out," she said before he could speak. "I just saw it." "Who talked?" "Doesn't matter, it's moving. 2 other outlets are already running with it." The article wasn't entirely wrong. It mentioned Ashley by name, lifted a photo from an old local fundraiser, even included Lucas's age. The spin was crude, words like scandal and cover-up peppered through the copy. But the worst part wasn't the story, it was the response, the swarm that followed. Within hours, camera crews showed up outside Ashley's apartment. Reporters camped near Lucas's school. One photographer tried to follow them in a car when Ashley dropped him off, and Lucas noticed. Ashley pulled him out of class the next day. Nathaniel called her that afternoon. She didn't answer. He sent a text, then another. Finally, he called Joanna. "I want security sent to her building. Nothing flashy. Just someone nearby, in case things get out of hand." Joanna hesitated. "You sure she'll be okay with that?" "No," he said. "But I'd rather deal with her yelling than find out someone got too close to him." So a small team was dispatched. Plainclothes. Low profile. Discreet. Or so they thought. Ashley showed up at his building the next day. No appointment. No warning. She walked past reception with the force of someone who didn't care if she was stopped, rode the elevator to the top floor, and pushed open the door to his office like she had every right to be there. Call them off. Nathaniel stood from his desk, surprised, but not entirely. "I didn't send anyone to bother you," he said. "You put men outside my building. Lucas saw them. They're watching the school now. They're there to protect you." "No. They're there to clean up your mess. And I don't want Lucas looking over his shoulder because you live in a circus." She didn't raise her voice, but she didn't have to. She was sharper than anger. She was tired. "You think I wanted this?" he asked. "It doesn't matter what you wanted. This is my kid's life. I spent years keeping him out of this exact kind of spotlight, and now he's a headline." Nathaniel had no comeback. She was right. The fallout hadn't touched him the way it had touched her. "Lucas is asking questions," she said. "And I can't lie to him anymore." Nathaniel sat back down slowly. "What are you going to tell him?" "The truth. That you're his father." He didn't expect to hear it stated so plainly. It stopped him for a moment. "Are you telling him now because of the story?" "I'm telling him because it's time. He deserves to know who he is. I won't let strangers and bloggers fill in the blanks." He nodded. It was the only thing he could do that didn't feel like stepping into her space. "Is there anything I can do?" She looked at him for a long moment, the edges of her exhaustion more visible now. "Don't make promises you won't keep. He's not some cause you can rescue." He watched her walk out again just like before, but this time there was something final in it, like she'd already braced for everything to get worse. That night, Lucas sat on the couch with a blanket over his knees and a bowl of dry cereal in his lap. Ashley muted the TV and sat next to him. She didn't ease into it. She told him that the story on the news was true, that Nathaniel Grant was his biological father, that she had tried to contact him long ago and had failed, that she'd done everything she could to give him a life without needing that man. Lucas didn't say anything for a while. Then he asked, "Did he know about me?" "No, not until recently." "Did he want to know?" "I don't think he even knew to ask." Lucas nodded. "Do I have to talk to him?" "Not unless you want to." He picked up a cereal loop and popped it in his mouth. "He's the guy who gave me the money, right?" Ashley let out a breath and nodded. Through the foundation. Yeah. That's kind of weird. Yeah. Lucas looked at her. But I'm still me, right? Of course. He nodded again. Then I guess it's fine. Nathaniel watched the press conference stream live the next morning from his office. He stood behind a podium and delivered a prepared statement. Acknowledged the story. Confirmed its accuracy. Asked for privacy. Made it clear that this was personal, not part of his business or his brand. He didn't name Ashley. He didn't say Lucas's name. He said only what was necessary. The press didn't care. The story was too good to let go, but something shifted when he stood there and took it head on. People started talking less about scandal and more about surprise. Some criticized him, some praised him, most just speculated. But for Ashley and Lucas, the change was permanent. The quiet life they'd built wasn't quiet anymore. The world had gotten in. What came next? None of them fully knew, but something had started, and none of them could pretend it hadn't. The story hadn't disappeared, not completely. It lingered in sidebars of gossip blogs, resurfaced in comment threads, occasionally flickered back onto TV segments any time Nathaniel made a public appearance. But in the weeks that followed his press conference, the headlines faded just enough for them to breathe again. The swarm moved on to fresher targets, and with it, the pressure thinned. Nathaniel knew better than to think it was over, but it was quieter. Quiet enough to try something real. He didn't call right away. He waited. A few days passed before he sent a message to Ashley, short and simple. I'd like to see him. No press. No expectations. She didn't reply immediately. It took 3 days before a single line came back. Science fair, Thursday, 5 p.m. He showed up early. Dressed like a dad, trying too hard not to look like a dad. Sneakers too clean. Jeans that still had a store fold. And a hoodie that made him look like someone trying to blend in at a high school reunion. He walked through the school's side entrance unnoticed until a kid in the hallway froze and whispered his name like a dare. A teacher raised an eyebrow, but waved him through after a polite nod. The science fair was in the gymnasium. Card tables, lined up in rows, each with glittered trifold boards and rubber band-powered contraptions. Kids buzzed around, talking too fast, pointing at baking soda volcanoes and lemon-powered clocks. Nathaniel walked slowly, scanning the tables until he spotted Lucas near the back, standing in front of a model of the Mars rover made entirely from cardboard and bottle caps. Lucas spotted him and grinned without hesitation. Hey, you came. I said I would. Want to see how the claw works? I got it to pick up gum wrappers. Nathaniel leaned in as Lucas demonstrated the claw using a set of bent coat hangers and fishing line. He listened as the boy explained the mechanics in detail, too fast and skipping every fourth word, barely pausing to breathe. He didn't ask about business or money or the news, just walked him through the design like it was the most important invention in the room. Nathaniel didn't pretend to understand every piece, but he paid attention. Ashley stood at a distance, arms crossed loosely as she watched. She hadn't dressed up. Her scrubs were covered by a zip-up jacket, and her hair was pulled back in a way that suggested she'd just come off a shift. She stayed out of the conversation until Lucas waved her over to show off a ribbon pinned to his board. He won second place, she said quietly when she reached them. He should have won first. His project caught fire during testing. They marked him down for a safety issue. Lucas didn't seem bothered. He kept talking, switching between Nathaniel and another boy who stopped to ask about a light sensor taped to the front of the model. Nathaniel stayed until the cleanup started, helping fold the table legs while Lucas stacked his supplies into a shoebox. Later, Ashley walked him out to the parking lot. The sun had dipped behind the trees, leaving long shadows on the pavement. "He seems okay," Nathaniel said. "He's good at adapting." "You let me come. Thank you." Ashley shrugged. "He wanted you there. I figured that mattered more than how I felt about it." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "I'd like to come to his soccer game next week, if that's all right. Section C bleachers. Saturday at 10. Don't be late. He gets twitchy if people show up after kickoff." He did show up 10 minutes early with a folding chair and a small thermos of coffee he didn't even drink. He kept his head down and stayed off his phone. Lucas saw him before warm-ups and gave a half wave before running toward the rest of his team. Nathaniel sat through the whole game, quiet, clapping politely when Lucas passed the ball or managed to stay upright during a messy sprint. He didn't approach him afterward, just gave a thumbs up and a smile when Lucas looked his way. He came to another event the following week, a classroom art show. This time, Ashley didn't stand so far away. She walked over after Lucas had run ahead to show a classmate his piece, a lopsided clay owl with glittered feathers. "You're showing up a lot," she said. "I'm trying to." "Why now?" "Really?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because I can't stop thinking about all the years I didn't." She didn't say anything to that. He invited her to coffee after the next school meeting. Just coffee, no agenda. She agreed, but kept her guard up. They sat in a quiet cafe, talked about Lucas's favorite teacher, his weird obsession with folding origami animals from receipts, the way he hated carrots, but would eat them if they were cut into stars. Ashley relaxed a little, but didn't let him in too far. She'd done the parenting alone. She was still doing it. The rhythm was hers, and she didn't want it rewritten too easily. Still, she let him keep coming. To the games, the open houses, the after-school events, she started returning his texts a little faster. Lucas didn't call him Dad, but he started asking questions. Lots of them. "What was your favorite toy when you were my age? Do you know how to swim? Are you rich, or just TV rich?" Nathaniel tried to answer honestly. He said he used to have a red race car toy that broke within a week. He said he could swim okay, but mostly just stayed upright and tried not to look like he was drowning. He said he didn't know if he was rich, but admitted he'd never had to worry about coupons. Lucas asked if his house had secret passageways. Nathaniel told him it didn't, but agreed they were missing out. Ashley watched most of this from a distance at first, then closer. She started to see the awkward way Nathaniel tried to relate, how he let Lucas talk for hours and never corrected him even when he got things wrong. She watched him nod even when Lucas rambled into tangents. She noticed how, when Lucas asked if he'd ever made anything cool as a kid, Nathaniel didn't brag about his company. He just said, "Once I built a slingshot that broke a neighbor's mailbox. It was cool until it wasn't." One afternoon, after a long day and a long walk to her car, he brought it up. They stood outside Lucas's school while the last few kids filtered out. "I'd like to spend more time with him, with both of you." Ashley raised an eyebrow. "Like what? More games?" "No, a trip, a week maybe, somewhere quiet. No press, no bodyguards, just us." She looked at him for a long moment. "You want to take a vacation with us?" "Not a vacation, just time, somewhere out of the city, so I can get to know him. And maybe so he can know me without all this noise." She didn't answer right away. She didn't say no either. Later that night, she asked Lucas what he thought about going somewhere with Nathaniel for spring break. "Like a real trip?" he asked. "Yeah, just us three. He wants to get to know you better. Lucas shrugged, then smiled. Only if I can bring my glue gun. That was how she said yes. A quiet yes. A cautious one. But it was something. The drive to the cabin took just under 4 hours. Lucas spent most of it asking questions from the back seat. What kind of animals lived near the lake? Would there be internet? Could he bring the robot he was building in a shoebox? Nathaniel answered when he could, and made up what he didn't know. Ashley sat in the passenger seat, hands loosely clasped in her lap, looking out the window more often than not. She'd agreed to the trip, but she hadn't agreed to let her guard down, and she made that clear before they even left town. 1 week, 1 house. No assumptions. She and Nathaniel would sleep in separate rooms. He'd keep things simple. Lucas came first. He nodded and didn't argue. The cabin was larger than Ashley expected. Tucked behind a line of pine trees, the wooden house overlooked a still, glassy lake that reflected the sky like it was holding it in place. The place looked untouched, like no one had been there in months, probably years. Nathaniel unlocked the door with a key that still had a plastic tag dangling from it. Lucas ran through the rooms as soon as it opened, calling out discoveries like a kid on a scavenger hunt. 2 bathrooms, a porch swing, a whole drawer full of hot chocolate packets. Ashley carried in their bags herself and picked the smaller guest room at the back. Nathaniel took the other, opposite side of the house. They didn't talk much that first night. Dinner was simple, spaghetti and garlic bread from a box, and they ate it on mismatched plates found in one of the kitchen cabinets. Lucas declared it pretty good for microwave pasta and gave it a 7 out of 10. He fell asleep on the couch before finishing his movie. The next day started early. Lucas woke them up at sunrise with the enthusiasm of someone who had no sense of how loud he was. He wanted to go outside. Nathaniel promised a fire pit, which he hadn't yet built. By mid-morning, he was elbow-deep in gravel and half-split logs, while Lucas gave design suggestions that made no engineering sense but sounded exciting. Ashley sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched Nathaniel attempt to make a fire ring with stones that wouldn't stay in place and a lighter that barely worked. It should have been frustrating, but it was oddly entertaining. He didn't complain. He just muttered quietly under his breath and kept going. That afternoon, they tried fishing. Nathaniel hadn't fished since he was a teenager, and it showed. He had no patience for untangling lines or baiting hooks, and after 30 minutes of nothing but mosquito bites and one very enthusiastic dragonfly, he declared that they were probably just too advanced for these local fish. Lucas rolled his eyes and made up a story about a legendary fish named Captain Bitey, who had been alive for 100 years and avoided all traps. Ashley didn't fish, but she brought sandwiches and laughed at the running commentary from both of them. The sun dipped low before they packed up, and Lucas fell asleep in the car on the drive back to the cabin. Each day followed the same rough rhythm. Morning chaos, afternoon attempts at some outdoor activity, quiet dinners, and board games by the fireplace. Nathaniel let Lucas win every time, though he wasn't subtle about it. Lucas noticed, but didn't say anything. Instead, he started playing harder, trying to earn the win just in case. By the third night, the atmosphere had shifted. The tension hadn't disappeared, but it no longer sat between every word. Nathaniel had stopped checking his phone every 10 minutes. Ashley no longer corrected his every move or second-guessed his attempts. They spoke more. Not about the past at first, but about small things, Lucas's habits, Ashley's work, the bizarre shows Lucas watched before bed. It wasn't warm exactly, but it was easier. One evening, after Lucas had finally passed out in his bed after too much sugar and too many marshmallows, Nathaniel stepped outside to the edge of the lake. Ashley was already there, her arms tucked into the sleeves of her sweater, watching the water. He stood beside her without asking. "It's quieter than I thought it'd be," he said. She nodded. "That's why I said yes." They stood in silence for a while before she added, "He's happy this week. That's why I haven't stopped it." "I can tell." She looked at him briefly, then back at the lake. "When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I didn't know what I was doing. I kept thinking you'd call, that maybe I'd hear from you eventually. I didn't even know there was something to respond to. I know that now. But at the time, it just felt like being ignored." He rubbed a hand across his neck. "My father handled everything for the foundation. If he said he'd take care of something, I assumed it was a donation or a board issue, not this. I wrote to you twice. I never saw them. I figured that out the day his lawyer showed up instead." Nathaniel didn't speak for a moment. The breeze off the lake was cool against the back of his neck. "I'm angry at him for keeping it from me," he said. "But I'm angry at myself too. I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't think about what he might be covering up." Ashley didn't respond right away. Then she said, "I was scared you'd show up just long enough to disappear again. I get that. I still worry about it. I don't blame you." They stood there a while longer. No more confessions, just the sound of the lake brushing against the shore. Then, as they walked back toward the cabin, Nathaniel glanced at her and said, "This is the first thing I've done in a long time that doesn't feel like I'm faking it." The next morning, Lucas woke up to the smell of pancakes and the sound of quiet laughter in the kitchen. He padded down the hallway in his socks and found Nathaniel flipping a mess of half-burned batter on a skillet, while Ashley sat at the table with a cup of coffee, telling him he was using the wrong pan. Nathaniel argued that there was no such thing as a wrong pan when the food was edible. Lucas stood in the doorway, watching them talk like they had been doing it for years. He didn't say anything right away. He just smiled, then walked over and asked if he could add blueberries. Nathaniel handed him the bowl. Ashley handed him a fork. They all sat down to eat, and for the first time since everything changed, it didn't feel like anyone was trying too hard. The drive back from the cabin was quieter than the one that had brought them there. Lucas slept most of the way, curled up under his hoodie in the back seat, while Nathaniel and Ashley spoke in bits and pieces about the weather turning, the traffic ahead, the bag of souvenirs stuffed under the seat. Neither one said much about the week they'd just spent together, but the silence between them felt different now. Not tense, just full. Back in the city, everything felt louder, faster. Schedules came rushing back in, like the trip had been a dream that ended the second they unpacked. But Nathaniel didn't let it drift into memory. He started showing up on weekends without being asked. Not just to wave or drop something off, he stayed. He helped Lucas build a complicated Lego set that had been collecting dust, watched movies he didn't understand, and tried to pretend he wasn't completely lost during spelling drills and social studies flashcards. He didn't always get it right. Sometimes he checked his phone too often. Sometimes he made a promise he couldn't keep, and more than once he showed up 20 minutes late. But Lucas never kept score, and Ashley, to her surprise, stopped keeping track too. She watched him figure things out. The slow way he adjusted his life, not just his schedule, but his habits. He started leaving work earlier on Fridays. He turned down 2 major speaking events. He learned to braid a friendship bracelet one afternoon, when Lucas insisted that all the cool grown-ups were doing it. It took him 3 tries, but he didn't give up. Ashley found the finished bracelet weeks later in the back seat of her car, tangled around the gear shift. He came to Lucas's 3rd grade play, and sat through an hour of kids forgetting lines and waving at parents. He clapped louder than anyone when Lucas took his final bow. Afterward, he carried the paper sword Lucas had made out of tinfoil and cardboard like it was a real prop, never once acting like he had somewhere else to be. They weren't back together, not in any official way, but something was happening between them, something slow, steady, and hard to ignore. It was in the way she let him come in without asking, in how he washed the dishes one night without being told, in how she leaned into the couch cushions beside him when Lucas fell asleep on the other side. One night, after Lucas had gone to bed, Ashley stayed in the kitchen a little longer. Nathaniel sat across from her, turning a water glass slowly in his hands. The room was dim, except for the light above the sink. "I used to wonder," he said. "About what? If we would have made it, back then." Ashley didn't answer right away. She reached for her cup, but didn't drink from it. "I wondered too." He looked across at her, something open and tentative in his face, not performance, not strategy, just a man trying to say something without breaking it. "I think about how different everything could have been." She didn't tell him to stop. She didn't remind him how much time had passed or how much they'd both changed. Instead, she said, "Sometimes I wish I hadn't given up trying to reach you. But I also think maybe Lucas was always meant to be raised the way he was. Maybe we were meant to find each other again when we were finally ready." Nathaniel nodded once. He didn't try to say anything wise. He reached across the table, palm up, and waited. She looked at his hand, then took it. A few weeks later, he invited them to the park on a Saturday, using the excuse of good weather and stale bread for the ducks. It was drizzling by the time they got there, but Lucas insisted on staying. He ran toward the pond with the bread bag tucked under his arm, calling out to birds that had already started waddling in his direction. Ashley followed slowly behind, laughing as her sneakers sank into the soft grass. Nathaniel stayed back for a moment, watching the two of them. Then he reached into his coat pocket. No grand speech, no rehearsed lines. Just a small velvet box he'd carried for 3 days, waiting for the right second to mean it. Ashley turned toward him as he walked over. The rain was light enough to ignore. She raised an eyebrow at the box in his hand. "Seriously?" she said. "Yeah. Here?" "I didn't want it to be perfect," he said. "I just wanted it to be real." She looked at him, then down at the ring, then back up. "I don't have a speech," he added. "I just want more of this. Us, you, him, all of it." Ashley didn't cry. She wasn't the type. But her voice caught when she said yes, and she had to clear her throat before she hugged him. Lucas ran back a minute later, confused as to why they were hugging in the rain and why Nathaniel suddenly looked so happy. Ashley handed him the box. "You're in charge of guarding this until the wedding." Lucas opened it, whistled low. "Can I keep it if you guys change your mind?" "No," they said at the same time. The ceremony happened 3 months later. Small, private, with just a handful of people they trusted. Ashley wore a simple dress with no veil. Nathaniel wore a dark suit, and the look of someone trying not to ruin the best thing he'd ever been given. Lucas stood between them, holding the rings. He gave them to the officiant with a solemn face and then burst into giggles halfway through the vows when Nathaniel tripped over a line. Ashley laughed too. Everyone did. The press picked up the story, of course. There were headlines, but this time the tone had shifted. Words like scandal were replaced with second chances, redemption, family. People loved a happy ending, and for once, Nathaniel didn't mind being the center of one. The photos showed a small wedding, under a green canopy, a boy grinning with cake on his face, a couple holding hands not like they were showing off, but like they had finally figured out how to stop letting go. What had started as a surprise, a letter scribbled in crayon, had turned into something none of them could have predicted. A life, a rhythm, a family. Not perfect, but theirs. The years didn't move quickly so much as they filled up. The quiet life Nathaniel had once known, orderly, scheduled, polished around the edges, gradually gave way to something more unpredictable, louder, often chaotic, and entirely better. He and Ashley settled into routines that rarely stayed the same. There were early mornings filled with burnt toast and half-finished school projects, late nights spent arguing over phone privileges and curfews, and dozens of small, messy moments that slowly knitted their lives together in ways that no contract or ceremony ever could. Nathaniel never stopped working, but he learned how to make space. Space for school pickups, for Wednesday night baseball games in the rain, for recitals where Lucas forgot half his lines and grinned through the rest. He showed up, even when he didn't fully understand what he was supposed to do. He helped with math homework, though he had to relearn most of it first. He sat through parent-teacher meetings and school fundraisers, made PB, J sandwiches badly, and grew into the kind of dad who knew the names of Lucas's friends, the locker number he kept forgetting, and the exact way he liked his pancakes, burnt around the edges, syrup on the side. Ashley never said she was proud of him for figuring it out, but she didn't have to. She showed it in quieter ways. The way she let him handle bedtime when Lucas had a bad day. The way she let herself lean on him more during long work weeks. The way they argued and forgave each other without turning it into a spectacle. The marriage wasn't perfect. It wasn't built on perfection, but it held strong through the things that mattered. Patience, effort, trust that had been earned slowly over time. Lucas grew up in the middle of all of it. He still asked too many questions, still made things out of tape and cardboard and whatever electronics he could sneak from the junk drawer. He had a mind that never stopped moving and a heart that surprised them both with how soft it was. As he got older, the questions shifted from how engines worked to what he should do with his future, why some friendships drifted apart, whether he was good enough to get into the schools he dreamed about. Nathaniel never pretended to have the answers, but he stayed in the conversation. That, it turned out, mattered more than knowing everything. By the time senior year rolled around, their house was half full of college brochures and forgotten deadlines. Lucas stayed up too late most nights, typing essays, revising applications, texting with friends about everything and nothing. Ashley tried to play it cool, but Nathaniel saw the look on her face each time an envelope came in the mail. They were proud, both of them, in that way parents get when they realize the kid they raised is about to step into a world they can't fully prepare him for. Graduation came fast. The ceremony was held on a warm June afternoon, in a field behind the school that had been turned into an outdoor auditorium with folding chairs and a creaky podium. Ashley ironed Lucas's gown the night before. Nathaniel checked the batteries in the camera, and the three of them rode together in a car filled with nervous jokes and last-minute advice about not tripping on stage. Lucas was named valedictorian 2 weeks before. Nathaniel didn't find out from Lucas himself, but from the school principal, who casually mentioned it at a fundraiser. When Nathaniel asked Lucas why he hadn't told them sooner, he shrugged and said, "I wanted it to be a surprise." They sat near the front. Ashley kept her hands folded in her lap, trying not to fidget. Nathaniel held the program loosely in one hand and watched the line of graduates shuffle toward the stage, caps askew and tassels tangled. When Lucas's name was called, Ashley reached for Nathaniel's hand without thinking. He squeezed hers once. Lucas stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it with too much force, and cleared his throat. His speech started like most valedictorian speeches do, with a joke about how long it had taken to get there, a mention of teachers who made a difference, a few lines about friendship, mistakes, memories. Then he paused, just long enough to make people shift in their seats. "This is supposed to be a speech about resilience," he said, "about overcoming challenges and chasing the future. But I've been thinking about what really got me here, and it's not just books or late nights or hard work. It's people. People who show up, who stay, who try, even when they don't know how." He looked out across the crowd. He didn't need to search for them. He already knew where they were sitting. "I want to thank my mom for everything. For showing me how to be strong without being hard. For teaching me that being honest is braver than pretending to have it all figured out." Ashley blinked quickly, but said nothing. Nathaniel's hand was still in hers. "And I want to thank someone else," Lucas continued. "Someone who didn't know I existed for a long time, but who showed up the moment he did, who stayed, who didn't try to fix everything, just listened and learned and cared in all the right ways. Thank you for being the dad you didn't know you were, and the one I didn't know I needed." Nathaniel didn't move. He couldn't. Not because he was overwhelmed, but because the weight of those words landed so gently and fully at the same time, like a door closing softly behind him. It was done. The years of wondering, of catching up, of not knowing what he was doing, they had brought him here, to this. The crowd clapped. Ashley wiped her face and didn't hide it. Lucas smiled, gave a small nod, and stepped back from the microphone. There were no headlines the next day. No photographers waiting outside. Just a family walking back to their car in a field of folding chairs and discarded programs. Lucas carried his cap in one hand and joked about how the speech had been too short. Ashley rolled her eyes and told him he owed her dinner. Nathaniel stayed a step behind them, watching them tease and talk, and thought again about that first letter. A thank you card, scrawled in crayon, sent to a man who hadn't known what he'd been missing, a card that had changed everything. And now, years later, a thank you spoken out loud, not in private or in secret, but in front of everyone who mattered. This time, there was no confusion in the words, no guessing, just truth, full circle. If you liked this story, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really supports the channel. For more emotional, feel-good stories, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you're always in the loop. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.